Hello friends, I'm Waverly and today we're going to be going over the moon phases, which is pretty exciting as it's one of my favorite things to learn about in science. After our lesson today, students will be able to describe the 8 phases of the moon, order them in chronological order. Students will be able to create a representation of each specific moon phase, explain what causes the phases to occur, define waxing, waning, gibbous, and crescent moons, be able to explain how long it takes for the moon to complete a revolution around the Earth, and finally, explain the size of the moon. As you can see, we have a lot of objectives, so let's get started. So, before we get into new content for students to learn, it is important to first see where your students are at. In the classroom, I'd ask my students what they already know about moons, and we can make this fun and interactive by using a Padlet board. As you guys can tell, I have some pretty smart students, and a lot of them are pretty notable. But I love Padlets because they're effective in understanding what your students know, and students don't really look at them as boring schoolwork. They're really fun and give students a lot of options to express their knowledge. As a teacher, you can save 3 Padlet boards for free, or even just screenshot them to reference later as I did. I give my students about 5 minutes to give me their best answers, and we would go over their answers, misconceptions, and talk about the ones that relate to the specific topics we will go over, such as Ben Roethlisberger's answer. For his answer, you can even expand and ask students if they know exactly how long it takes, and the closest answer gets a prize. Hint, the answer averages out to be 27.3 days. After we get through talking about our prior knowledge, I want to pump up my students with this moon phases rap. Kids love songs, and if they have accurate information, they can be pretty useful. On my praxis test, I actually sung the cell theory song I learned in my biology class in my head to figure out the answer to one of the questions. The song I linked here is pretty catchy and can be effective for students to memorize the phases of the moon. To get your students familiar with the vocabulary, you can put the link on your Google Classroom and encourage students to listen to it at home. You can also play at the beginning or end of science class. After the students have listened to their new favorite song and are now familiar with moon phase vocabulary, I would have them take out their science notebooks to go over notes for today. The notes we will go over today are the key information that students should learn when they first learn about moon phases. The first key point students should understand is that the moon phases result from light reflected on the moon from the sun. Believe it or not, some students might have the misconception that the moon actually changes shape, so it's always important to over-explain information. The next point students should write down is that the moon goes around the Earth, and if the moon only stayed in one place, we would only see one moon phase. This concept can be hard to understand, so I would explain to students that I will be showing a video for visual understanding after this slide. The next thing students will learn is that Earth is 3 times bigger than the moon. To make this interactive, I could have a student come up to the whiteboard and draw the moon and the Earth. If they show the Earth being significantly larger than the moon, they've done a great job. Students will also learn that the moon is composed of similar materials as Earth. The moon has a crust, mantle, inner core, and outer core, just as the Earth. The last note students should take is that the moon is really old, but still younger than the Earth. It is important to model the moon phases for students because it can be hard for them to visualize it occurring in their head. This is a fabulous video of a teacher showing how a person, a light bulb, and a ball can represent the moon phases. I would show this video on the active board, or if I had the supplies, I would demonstrate the representation in person. Students love this activity because it's real science in the classroom, and you can visually see all of the moon phases occurring just as they would in space. Now we will dive into knowing the specific moon phases. If I were teaching this in class, I would prepare an anchor chart similar to this one, and I would hang it on the board so all students can see. Using their science notebooks, I would have my students draw each moon phase around the Earth and have them label the phase appropriately. I would have them write down that gibbous means that there is more moon than shadow showing. Crescent means more shadow than moon showing. Waning means the moon is appearing smaller, and waxing means the moon is appearing larger. If you are teaching this for younger grades, I would recommend handing out this sheet to glue into their science notebooks instead of all the writing and drawing. I would take out the labels of the phases and the definitions and have students write them from the anchor chart. Now I will check my students' understanding and give them a Quizlet matching game to do. If we were in person, we could do it as a class on the smartboard, and if we're virtual, all students can access this through Nearpod. If students are generally understanding, even if they have to use their new notes, we can move on to the activity. The activity that I will do with my students will be a great opener for the 4th grade SOL 4.6. After we've done our activity, students will be able to investigate and understand that there are relationships among the Earth, the Moon, and the Sun. Key relationships include the motions of the Earth, the Moon, and the Sun, the causes for the 4 major phases of the Moon, and the relative size, position, age, and makeup of the Moon. The activity I have chosen to do with my students is the famous, fun Oreo representation activity. Students will need 4 cookies, 1 spoon, 1 plate, and markers to draw their Earth and Sun and label their moon phases. This should be a pretty easy task for students to do since I have their anchor charts up and students have their notes. Of course, once students have shown me, I'll take a picture and they can eat their cookies. I love this image, but I do think it is important for students to understand the sun's relation, as it would be right next to the new moon, so I would definitely have my students represent that. Of course, with all great things, there are problems to arise. The first is that we all know teacher salaries are not the greatest, and these items can definitely be expensive. I noted that for a class of 25, 3 family packs of Oreos are required. Another problem that can happen is students may not be able to control themselves from eating their moon phases. I mean, can we blame them? I would definitely start out by telling the students that they are not allowed to eat the Oreos until they have shown me and I have taken a picture. The last problem that could occur is students might be allergic to Oreos. In this case, you would have to be creative and think fast. So I would send a notice home before the activity to let parents and families know about what we are doing in class. While students are eating their cookies, students can look up their birthdays and find out which moon phase occurred on their birthday. We can do this as a class and students can write about it in their science notebooks. We could also create a tally on the whiteboard of whose birthday shared the same moon phase. This could be really fun for students and can further their understanding of the moon phases. This is a great website that shows every moon phase that has ever occurred dating back to 1930. After students are done with the activity, have enjoyed eating their cookies, looked up their birthday, and participated in the class tally chart, I would have students play a moon phases Kahoot. Kahoots are fun activities for students, but this may be especially hard for them because they have just learned the material. I would suggest doing a couple of rounds where students can reference their notes first so they can get warmed up. This will function as the end assessment of the lesson. The best part about this Kahoot is you can link it to Google Classroom and have students practice it when they go home. This will ensure that students are retaining the knowledge and not just understanding in class and then forgetting. Before science class is over, we will quickly go over the objectives and have students yell out the answers. When they have done this, they will get a high five and can put away their science materials and get ready for the next transition. Students should definitely know all of these objectives from all of the activities we've done today and from the great notes they've taken. I hope you guys have learned a lot about moons today. Here are all of my sources. Thank you guys so much, and don't forget to go to the Google Slides link so you can watch all of the videos and play with the Kahoot and Quizlet.